vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, July 5th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Sustaining a democratic republic means putting in work each day. By Nicole Bibbins Sidaka. After the 1787 Constitutional Convention, American socialite Elizabeth Willing Powell asked Benjamin Franklin whether the founding leaders had just created a monarchy or a republic. Franklin famously answered, "A republic, if you can keep it." As Americans celebrate our nation's 250th anniversary, those words provide us with an excellent reminder of how to think about American freedom on this important milestone. America's democratic experiment was a radical choice, and it is a privileged opportunity that we must work every day to preserve. The founders rejected the idea of creating a new monarchy and instead chose a democratic form of government, a republic, which entitles citizens to vote and empowers representatives elected by those citizens to govern according to the laws of the nation. They also notably rejected direct democracy, which would allow citizens to vote on every decision, an unwieldy option they considered could result in mob rule, in which the powerful could take away the rights of the less powerful. Liberty was only possible in an empire of laws and not of men, as John Adams wrote in his April 1776 Thoughts on Government. The framers knew what a privilege it would be to live in a nation where power is given to the people, where the central principle is liberty, and where the national identity is our shared democratic values. They understood that the freedoms of worship, speech, and much more would be possible only under a system of laws that gave voice to the people and their representatives. They knew that an undemocratic leader, unwilling to submit to the rule of law, could subject citizens to the whims of the few rather than protect the rights endowed by their creator, that a structure built on the unrestrained power of one individual or family could lead to tyranny. Those who chose to come to America, fleeing religious or other persecutions, knew the importance of independence from such representation. For those who endured the wanton brutality of slavery, disenfranchisement, or second-class citizenship, it would regrettably be decades or centuries until they would taste the goodness of freedom in this nation. But they, too, eventually came to experience living under a government that people selected with a guarantee of rights and with protection of the rule of law. Our founders knew that maintaining our democratic republic would be a challenge, that it wouldn't be self-sustaining without vigilance and self-correcting mechanisms to protect our democracy. They gave citizens the power to choose leaders who would govern democratically. They gave courts, legislators, and executives the authority to check and balance power to ensure none of them accumulated unduly outsized control. And they articulated the freedoms that all people should enjoy so that those denied rights had an original document to anchor their claims. Over the last 2.5 centuries, women and men have fought to shape our nation, correct its shortcomings, and protect it from enemies, foreign and domestic, thus choosing liberty time and time again. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to each of those who chose to defend our republic and its freedom over any other goal. Sustaining a democratic republic requires citizens to understand, commit to, and defend the principles of our nation every day. It requires us to put our nation before our diverse political, ideological, or ethnic identities, recognizing that a strong democratic republic is exactly what will allow us to live in our diversity, protected from a state telling us what to believe, think, or say. Miraculously, we have maintained our democratic republic for centuries, and the challenge that Franklin foreshadowed remains. On the 4th of July, we honored those who, throughout American history, have shaped and defended our republic and freedom. And now it's our turn. We must make the daily choice to live up to the democratic values that are foundational to our country. We must embrace the privilege of living in a free nation where all people are guaranteed equal rights under the Constitution. And we must accept the challenge of defending our nation's democratic ideals against partisanship, corruption, and self-serving rule. Our founders knew of the dangers facing our young democratic republic and what it would take to defend our freedom. Let us honor their courage by working to keep it. Nicole Bibbins Sidaka is the Kelly and David File Fellow at the George W. Bush Institute. She wrote this for indiesources.com. In Everybody's column, which are letters from our readers, legislators should pass the New York Health Act. As a fourth-year medical student who plans to devote my career to health care and the needs of fellow New Yorkers, I was inspired to see the Buffalo News address the insurance crisis precipitated by federal cuts to the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid. Such cuts affect the most vulnerable among us, compounding already widespread health disparities threatening the lives and well-being of too many of our neighbors and communities. As your editorial asserts, however, such intolerable precarity need not continue. Indeed, it is within our power to reduce and eliminate it now and in the future. We simply have to pass and implement the New York Health Act. I urge our state legislators to do exactly that. Then Governor Kathy Hochul can protect her beloved hometown and all New Yorkers by signing it into law. Based on decades of careful analyses, this is no pie-in-the-sky fantasy, nor a profligate tax and spend drain on the coffers of New York and its citizens. The evidence is there for all to see, compiled and available on the Campaign for New York Health's website. Implementation of the act would relieve local governments and school districts of huge budgetary obligations, lower local taxes, stimulate investments in our communities, while providing all New Yorkers with medical, dental, vision, hearing aids, and long-term care without co-pays or deductibles. Paid for by fair, progressive taxes, 95% of New Yorkers would pay less for such expanded coverage than they currently do. And employers would see their contributions reduced as well. By Dylan Wong, Buffalo. Rivera did the work to win his primary. The secondary headline on the front page of June 25 Buffalo News, Rivera, Bojack knocked on doors to win votes, is a spot-on evaluation of this primary election. I live in Kenmore, 4 blocks from the city line. On a Saturday in mid-May, there was a knock on my door, and there stood John Rivera on my porch. I didn't even know that he would be a potential rep for my district. He stayed for as long as I wanted to talk, answering all my questions, some of them very pointed, and even came in when I wanted to show him some recently discovered artifacts in my early 1900s home. I am not swayed by negative political ads on either side. What swayed me to vote for him was the conversation on my porch from someone who was willing to pound the proverbial pavement on a weekend to meet his voters. He wasn't just handing out a leaflet and moving on. He spent the time. Future local politicians should take note. This is by Mary Clancy in Kenmore. OLV Nursing Home is an excellent facility. Where do kindness, compassion, support, and dignity live? The residents and their family members can tell you that these qualities all live and flourish at Mercy Skilled Nursing Facility at Our Lady of Victory in Lackawanna. From your very first step into OLV, you are a welcome visitor. In the reception area, you're greeted with a welcoming hello and who are you here to see? Safety is a priority at OLV. Security personnel will instruct you on where to go and how to proceed to start your visit with your loved one. Care, kindness, and support are not only palpable, but visible throughout the building. Highly qualified staff can be seen aiding residents with their needs. No detail to care is missed. Care is given with a smile, a gentle touch, and acknowledgement of the value of the recipient in need. Not only did my mother receive care and support to a depth I could never have reached, but so did I. Any question or concern, no matter how small, I had regarding my mom was listened to and addressed. Everyone was approachable and never made me feel like I was a bother. As I look back and reflect on my mother's time spent at OLV, I know in my heart that I could not have provided her with better care than she was fortunate enough to receive from the staff at OLV. Susan Panic, Lancaster. City pools are a mess and need to be fixed. Channel 7 recently ran a story on the deplorable conditions of the Buffalo City public swimming pools. Nearly half of the pools are not opening this summer. Looking at the video of them, it seems like it will be a long time before these pools are going to be functional again. Recently held was the ribbon cutting for the new Buffalo Bills Stadium at a cost of $2.1 billion, with much of the cost being paid by taxpayers. The sad part is the kids of the city of Buffalo will be looking to cool off this summer, yet half of the pools they would use will not be available for them. Why? No money has been allocated to fix the pools. However, we found over $800 million in tax money toward a stadium most of these kids may never get to see. Mr. Pegula, Governor Hochul, and Mayor Ryan, can you scrape up a few bucks to renovate these pools for the kids? Surely 5 or 6 pool repairs couldn't cost anywhere near the money needed to build the new Pegula Playpen. By Larry Shiro of Williamsville. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Infrasound from data centers is harmful. Infrasound, a term that might be unfamiliar to many, refers to sound waves with frequencies below the human hearing threshold of 20 hertz. Some like to reference this as low noise frequency, but they're not exactly the same thing. Infrasound is felt rather than heard. It is known to cause vibrations in the chest, feelings of unease, and physical pressure. Infrasound from a data center never quits. It is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Infrasound levels are measured in dBs at 100, 110, 120. Levels at 120 are well known to be very dangerous to the human body. The cumulative effects are evident throughout the cardiovascular system, nervous system, the auditory system, and mental health. According to a study produced at the University of Groningen, the Netherlands, low noise frequency is more audible, felt at night. Sleep is very important, as this is when the human body heals. Infrasound travels easily through buildings. Because of the low frequency, below 20 hertz, these sound waves have long wavelengths that easily pass through physical barriers like walls, floors, and glass with very little loss of energy. Infrasound tricks the human body into a localized stress response, with ear pressure increasing by 41%, irritability increasing by 33%, and depression increasing by 33%. Data centers are making people sick. As a resident in Alabama, I have attended many meetings. Recently, I was escorted out of the meeting by a deputy sheriff under the insistence of Planning Board Chairman Carl Kumpf. I was opposing the sound study findings from Wendell Engineering. We didn't wait for the full body of evidence before removing lead from paint and gasoline. We shouldn't have to wait for the full fallout of health issues from data centers. In closing, a quote from Hippocrates, father of medicine. Make a habit of doing two things, to help or at least do no harm. By Cheryl Cordes, Alabama. There's still a chance to save the country. Imagine if we had a functioning Congress. We would not be in the mess we are in now. No additional predators have been indicted for the sexual assault of the girls in the Epstein files. Republicans continue to cover up for people who are still out there, free to continue to abuse and ruin those innocent young lives. Republican reps Claudia Tenney and Nick Langworthy of New York continue to back the madness of this administration, and their big, beautiful bill for billionaires will result in thousands of Western New Yorkers losing their health care and safety nets. Hospitals have shuttered inpatient facilities. Health services are closing in towns big and small across Western New York. Data centers are left unregulated, free to steal our water and electricity while poisoning us. Yet Republicans continue, again and again, to give more to the mega-rich. Their cruelty has no limits. It's up to us. Turn the tide back to democracy, justice, and sanity. Check that you are registered to vote. Join a group. Get involved. We are the home of the brave, and it's time to prove it. Marion Peculio, Williamsville. We got mail. 37 letters were received this week. Number 1, 4th of July. 2, the Trump administration. 3, Iran. 4, environment. And 5, local issues. There's a color picture alongside of the We Got Mail of President Trump, and he is holding a photograph of the White House. The caption reads, President Trump speaks on May 19th at the site of ongoing construction of the planned White House ballroom in Washington. Letter writers continue to express frustration with him and his plans. Above that photo is another photo that shows the Capitol building and has bleachers set up. That caption reads, Risers are constructed June 16th on the National Mall in Washington ahead of the 4th of July festivities for the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Readers express their views on the state of the nation. This Land is Our Land. Native Reflections on the U.S. at 2:50 by J. Conrad Seneca. The United States is in the throes of a nationwide celebration of America's 250th birthday. Over the last several days, parades and events from coast to coast hailed 2.5 centuries of American independence, innovation, and progress. That has not been the American experience for Native people. The relationship between the United States and Indian country has always been complicated. When America's founding fathers were trying to establish a framework for their government, they found inspiration in the Haudenosaunee, the oldest continuous democracy in the world. For 1,000 years, our 6 nations, Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, and Tuscarora, have lived as sovereign and equal nations, united under the great law of peace. Benjamin Franklin was so impressed that he advocated using the great law and the organization of our nations as a model for uniting the 13 colonies. The Haudenosaunee's influence on the Constitution was officially recognized by a concurrent resolution passed by Congress in 1988. At the outset of the great American experiment, George Washington signed the Treaty of Canandaigua with the Haudenosaunee in 1794, pledging perpetual peace between our peoples and affirming the sovereignty of the Haudenosaunee and our homelands across what is today the state of New York. The treaty maintained that the United States would not claim or disturb any Haudenosaunee lands. It took all of 3 years for that treaty to be broken. Broken treaties and promises have been as commonplace in the United States as the barbecues and other celebrations that have been taking place throughout this weekend. As America's appetite for land and power grew more insatiable, its reach and focus continually turned toward the native lands it promised to honor and protect. Decade after decade, treaty after treaty, the United States grew through native loss. Millions of acres of land were taken from native nations. America's leaders were so intent not to let the promises they made impede the country's growth that the United States government mobilized efforts specifically designated to destroy us. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act, forcing Native people from their homelands to unsettled territory west of the Mississippi River. More than 60,000 Native people were forcibly relocated under the act, opening the door to another horrific chapter in United States history. Not content to take our land, destroy our traditional ways of life, and forcibly relocate our people, the government also wanted to make sure our children would never be seen as Indians by others or even themselves. For more than a century, Native children were taken from their families and sent to the government-run and sponsored residential boarding schools. While there, the children were stripped of the traditional language and culture and suffered abuse, violence, hatred, and in the case of thousands of children, even death at the hands of school officials. In visiting the Seneca Nation's Cattaraugus territory last year to formally apologize for New York's role in operating the Thomas Indian School from 1875 to 1957, Governor Kathy Hochul called the school a site of sanctioned ethnic cleansing. On that, we agree. America's record of broken promises and attacks against Native people and our lands is not ancient history. In the 1960s, the United States sought to control flooding in Pittsburgh, home to the country's steel industry. Again, they viewed native land as the solution. The federal government took more than 10,000 acres of Seneca Nation for the construction of the Kinzua Dam. Hundreds of Seneca families were forced to relocate. Our homes were burned to the ground. Schools and neighborhoods were bulldozed. Sacred sites were destroyed. The remains of our ancestors still rest at the bottom of the reservoir created as part of the dam project. While the United States has routinely strayed from its treaty obligations to Native America, the country has benefited from the service and bravery of Native people. In fact, Native warriors have served in the United States military at a higher rate than any other population. They have served in every major military conflict in the U.S., fighting in defense of freedom around the world. Many of our warriors made the ultimate sacrifice. Many continue to serve today. Native communities across Indian country continue to deal with the intergenerational trauma from what has been our American experience. But we are still here. Our resilience has never been broken, and our treaties and the United States' obligation under them remain the supreme law of the land. It is said that there can be no future without the past. After 250 years, one thing is clear. If America will ever become the best version of itself, then the United States must honor the principles of respect and sovereignty espoused by its founding fathers in its dealings with the native nations. Let's hope that doesn't take another 250 years. J. Conrad Seneca is president of the Seneca Nation of Indians. In another voice, healthcare, losing a rural community mainstay is painful, by Neil Pekskowski. When Jenny B. Richmond Nursing Home opened its doors in October of 1974 on the campus of Bertrand Chaffee Hospital in Springville, it represented far more than a new healthcare facility. As a not-for-profit nursing home, it embodied a promise that older adults in rural Western New York could receive skilled nursing care close to home, surrounded by the people and communities they loved. For more than 50 years, that promise was honored. Recently, I had the privilege and the heartbreak of serving as the last registered nurse on duty as we transferred our final resident to a new home. The reasons for Jenny B. Richmond's closure reflect challenges confronting rural health care across the nation. Financial pressures, workforce shortages, and changing reimbursement models have made it increasingly difficult for small community nursing homes to survive. The consequences are also felt by residents who must move farther from people and familiar places that have given them comfort for decades. When healthcare leaves a rural community, a part of that community leaves with it. What never diminished was the extraordinary dedication of the people who worked within Jenny B. Richmond's walls. Some employees devoted their entire careers to the nursing home. Their professionalism, compassion, and unwavering commitment ensured that every resident's final journey from Jenny B. Richmond was carried out with dignity and respect. Every resident was thoughtfully placed in a new home, and employees were supported in finding new opportunities. The closing of Jenny B. Richmond has strengthened my commitment to rural healthcare. As owner and co-founder of Buffalo and Southern Tier Infusion Nurse Staffing, LLC, I bring infusion therapies into the homes of patients in rural and underserved communities. The mission remains the same, ensuring that people can receive compassionate, high-quality care in the communities they call home. Although Jenny B. Richmond has closed its doors, its legacy lives on in the thousands of residents whose lives were touched and in the caregivers who now carry its values into new roles. Those values remain the foundation upon which the future of rural healthcare must be built. Neil Pekowski is a registered nurse at Bertrand Chaffee Hospital. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The editorial has a color photo of Assemblyman Jonathan Rivera, and the caption reads, "Jonathan Rivera scored an upset primary win. Victories such as Rivera's are indicative of voters feeling that their concerns are not being addressed." Primary upsets. Never mind political labels, voters are seeking solutions to real problems. Post-primary spin doctors have been busy. As usual, their messages are neither subtle nor helpful. From the Republican side, we're getting the usual commies on the loose scare tactics. From the Democratic side, alarmed at the victories of those who have added socialist to that affiliation, we're getting finger wagging and get back in your box. Neither of these positions sheds light on why, in districts where Democratic primaries were held throughout the country, voters often turned to candidates who at least appeared to be outside the dominant political establishment. Labeling does not explain why voters looked elsewhere when they were presented with party-endorsed candidates. The simple explanation is that people are looking for candidates who will fight to make their lives better. The most obvious source of dissatisfaction is economic. Former Bill Clinton wasn't wrong with his slogan, "It's the economy, stupid." But today's economy woes are much more specific. In spite of a national economy that seems relatively healthy at the macro level, at the micro level, many people don't feel like they're sharing in that fiscal health. Affordable starter homes don't seem to exist anymore. Food and fuel costs are putting family vacations out of reach, and healthcare costs are breaking the budgets. Hardworking people want to be able to afford these basic amenities. That's not socialism. That's the American dream. In the end, the label doesn't matter. Just as in many other endeavors, candidates will find the best results if they can meet voters where they are. Apparently, that's what happened in Buffalo when Assemblyman Jonathan Rivera defeated Erie County Democratic Party Chairman Jeremy Zellner, the incumbent state senator and endorsed candidate in the 61st District Senate primary. In another upset, Adam Bojack, a family court public defender and a Democratic socialist, was victorious in a three-way race over the endorsed candidate, Erie County Administrator Karen Hoke, and Kevin Deese, a U.S. Navy reservist and M&T Bank employee, for the 149th State Assembly District primary. Rivera has all but attained his seat, as he has no Republican opponent in the general election. Bojack will face Republican Frank Bogolsky in November. As reported by The News' Sandra Tan and Justin Sondel, postmortems of these campaigns show Rivera still out knocking on doors on the morning of the election, and Bojack employing a similar grassroots approach throughout his campaign. Both candidates were outspent by their opponents, who were able to buy more advertising and mailings, particularly Hoke, who benefited from more than $625,000 in gaming PAC spending. Bojack may wear the label of Democratic Socialist, but, like Rivera, he talks about the basic areas in which working families are coming up short: housing and health care. Pundits across the nation are still busy analyzing upset victories in New York City, where DSA candidates, activist and doctorate student Daraliza Avila Chevalier and Assembly member Claire Valdez defeated establishment candidates, including an incumbent, in their primaries for House seats. A more recent victory for the DSA came in Denver, where Milet Quiros, 29, toppled 15-term incumbent Representative Diana DeGetti in the Democratic primary. These are all solidly blue districts, so these winners will be seated in Congress next year. What happens next is anybody's guess. But as much as President Trump may be sick of talking about affordability and has publicly stated, "I love the inflation," it's unlikely that Americans who are struggling to pay for food, children, housing, and energy share that affection. Tossing labels around won't make these problems go away. Rather than wringing their hands about what they see as a schism in their party, Democratic leaders they see need to be rejoicing in a big tent that rejects the lockstep enforced allegiance of MAGA and welcomes younger, even insurgent voices that are speaking to the basic concerns of voters. A laser focus on those concerns should be the top priority in Washington and in Albany. The editorial cartoon by Adam Ziglas is a color drawing. There's a brick building with a window in it. The window has boards going across it. And above the window, there's a little transom with the word transparency. And then the title of this cartoon says Buffalo School Board. In my view, Be Careful with That Baseball Cap by Matt Boyle of Buffalo, who sports a Dodgers cap. I decided to wear a Boston Red Sox cap on Monday, June 29th. I floated the idea to the hive mind on Facebook and got loads of comments with varying advice. Why that particular day? Well, if you don't follow baseball, on the preceding Sunday, the Sox had accomplished the unthinkable, the improbable feat of sweeping a 4-game series with the New York Yankees. The basement-dwelling Sox had posted 3 decisive wins in a series-ending 1-run decision, much to the chagrin and consternation of Yankees fans the world over. My real focus is here: the politics and emotional power of baseball caps. I'm a fan of baseball. I have the cap of every Major League Baseball team and some minor league teams, including multiple Bison's caps. I grew up in New York City, and my parents also loved baseball and took me to both Mets and Yankee games. This is a rarity in New York City. But back to caps. The caps are the battle helmets of the front line of all the rivalries. It is well known that there are only 2 groups of fans: Yankee fans and everyone else. Ask Kansas City Royals fans who they're fans of, and they'll reply, the Royals, and whoever is playing the Yankees that day. Why? Well, the Yankees have won 27 World Series titles, and you only need to be around a Yankee fan for barely a hot New York minute before they You only need to be around a Yankee fan for barely a hot New York minute before they let you know that fact. The Yankees haven't won a title since 2009. By their calculation, that means something is terribly amiss with the universe. By their fans' conservative estimation, by 2026, the Yankees should collectively have won 42 sets of World Series rings. The diehard Yankee fan will begrudgingly admit that between 2010 and 25, they might have lost 1 World Series, probably to the Dodgers. Even the Yankees are entitled to a bad year now and again. I wore the Red Sox cap on an early morning shopping trip to the East Aurora Tops, which has a disproportionate number of Sox fans per capita by my usual observation. I had 0 Yankee fan encounters or confrontations. It's all good. I've had confrontations initiated by my cap choices with Yankee fans in the past, and will have confrontations initiated by Yankee fans as well into the future. A Sox cap to them is like a red cape to a bull. Other caps have their meanings. If you wear a cap of a franchise that has been losing for many decades, baseball fans of that team bond with you instantaneously, and all other fans think your loyalty is commendable, even cute. Wearing the hat of a really bad team offends no one. It's your cross to bear. But wearing a Yankees or a Dodgers cap will upset most other fans. Mets caps draw derision, as do Astro caps, but for different reasons. If you know, you know. Your safest bet in Western New York, if you want to avoid conflict and contempt, is a middling Midwestern team cap. St. Louis, Cincinnati, or Minnesota. However, don't wear these caps in the Midwest unless you're really a fan of said team. Midwesterners take their baseball and baseball rivalries very seriously. Baseball caps are political, and wearing a baseball cap is walking into a minefield of emotions, representing family traditions and moments of joy, sadness, and trauma. The bottom line, baseball cap PTSD is very real. My View is a first-person column open to all Western New Yorkers. If your article is selected for publication, a photo of you is required. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. No-cost birth is a bipartisan idea. Is it a good one? By Abby McCloskey. Second Lady Usha Vance's due date is rapidly approaching. I have no idea how health care expenses are treated for the Vice President's family, but J.D. Vance has long advocated for $0 out-of-pocket costs for giving birth. He's not alone. A bicameral, bipartisan group in Congress is working to make free birth a reality for all Americans. Childbearing in America isn't cheap. For most families, costs start accumulating right away, with prenatal appointments, ultrasounds, and blood tests. 1 in 5 pregnant women will also need miscarriage treatment. Then there's the birth itself. Childbirth is the most common reason for hospitalization in the United States. For families with private health insurance, the average cost of birth hovers around $3,000. If a newborn requires care in the neonatal intensive care unit, or if a family has a high deductible health plan, the cost can easily climb above $10,000. Then tack on more costs for postpartum appointments and newborn pediatric visits. The American middle class feels this burden the most. For families with income low enough to qualify for Medicaid, hospitalized childbirth is free, along with prenatal and postpartum care. And Medicaid covers 40% of births. Looking at America's peer countries, the average out-of-pocket cost of childbirth is $0. All this forms the backdrop to the Supporting Healthy Moms and Babies Act, which was introduced in the Senate last year, with companion legislation in the House. It seeks to bring the out-of-pocket costs for maternity care to $0, including prenatal, childbirth, neonatal, and postpartum expenses. These would be treated as essential services, and insurance premiums would be slightly increased to cover them. This sounds good on its face, but who doesn't love free things? But just because something is expensive doesn't mean the government should pay for it. Free birth unites a broad coalition across the political spectrum, with advocates ranging from Democratic Senator Christian Gillibrand of New York to Republican Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. This is the case even though the political left and right have been deep disagreements about the future of family policy. A free birth policy builds on the patch of common ground that healthy babies and mothers are plainly and clearly a social good. But free birth is not without costs, because nothing, of course, is actually free. Requiring insurers to cover childbirth will result in higher healthcare premiums and perhaps higher prices charged by hospitals who will know that patients won't bear the direct burden. If the government helps to offset the cost of birth, it will raise questions about why it does not invest in other family-friendly benefits instead. If the goal is broad financial relief for middle-class families, as opposed to structural change, that's more efficiently done through tax cuts. Nor is free birth going to bump up your own falling fertility rate. To mitigate costs while making birth a more predictable expense, a compromise could be an out-of-pocket cap on birth-related expenses. The government could set a ceiling of, say, $2,200 for maternity care, above which the cost would be borne by the insurance company or subsidized by the government. The $2,200,000 number is the amount of the current child tax credit, which, if applied against the costs of birth, would essentially make it free. Making birth free won't budge our nation's baby bust, but I'm glad it's on the table for debate. Whether you're the vice president or a family on Medicare or someone else in between, birth shouldn't break the bank. That was carried by the Bloomberg opinion. McCloskey, who wrote the article, is a Bloomberg columnist and podcast host who directed domestic policy on 2 presidential campaigns. Do Democrats have the guts to let a toxic nominee loose? By Frama Haroop. One of the saddest posts last weekend featured Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, a moderate, welcoming 3 Democratic Socialist of America candidates who had won primaries with a handful of votes. They included Daraliza Avila Chevalier, a nutcase who called for abolishing the borders, police, and prisons, in addition to accusing Joe Biden of rape. That she deleted those posts doesn't erase the intellectual deficiencies behind them. Republicans are already putting together a compendium of quotes from Chevalier and other DSA nominees to slow or even reverse expected GOP losses in the midterms. Who can blame them? An appalled former New York governor, David Paterson, who once represented the districted covering Harlem, Washington Heights, and part of the Bronx, said that Democrats face extinction if they keep nominating these left fringe characters. Chevalier won the district's Democratic nomination with only 5% of the district's vote. Other mainstream Democratic figures are making similar complaints. I call them figures rather than leaders because few prominent Democrats had been out there on the social media to inform many young Democrats. The recent DSA wins clearly woke up members of the Democratic establishment. Some say they should ramp up their get out the vote efforts. You think? Up in Maine, Democrats have hanging around their neck Graham Plattner, he of the fictional bio, Nazi tattoo, and rough history with women. A new Siena poll has Plattner leading incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins by a meaningless 2%. That's bad in a purple state and in a year said to favor Democrats. Do Democratic leaders have the stomach to let outrageous candidates who stormed their primaries lose in the general? Couldn't they pick one, just one, and make an example of it? In the 1991 Louisiana governor's race, former Ku Klux Klan member David Duke faced off against former Governor Edwin Edwards, a Democrat with a checkered past. Republican President George H.W. Bush denounced Duke, saying he wouldn't vote for him. Duke, like Plattner, had a Nazi association. And, also like Plattner, he later said he didn't really mean it. Louisiana voters chose Edwards. When a DSA-aligned contender wins a Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders can be expected to hop on the stage to claim victory before the cameras. The victory is not for Democrats, but for his invading forces. To the senator from Vermont and his followers, Democrats are the enemy. But the socialists know they cannot win in even liberal districts unless they get the Democratic line on the general election ballot. Whenever Sanders runs for re-election in Vermont, he makes sure his name is on the Democratic primary ballot. That prevents a real Democrat from opposing him in the general election. Once Sanders wins the primary, he immediately dumps on a Democratic label and becomes an independent. Sanders has spent much of this year in Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Maine, and New York promoting left fringe candidates. If they are elected, or even just nominated, Republicans use them to tar moderate Democrats with a good chance of winning. The senator from Vermont has made only 6 public appearances this year in the Green Mountain State. It's worth noting that in 2024, Sanders got 6,362 fewer votes in his own state than Kamala Harris did. When are the Democrats going to stop trying to placate a frivolous part of a low information electorate that prefers to show winning elections? Democrats must fight influencers with influencers. And it pains me to say this, but they must let the occasional destructive nominee go. Drawn-out debate. Political cartoonists from across the country celebrate the 4th of July. There's a photo of an American flag waving in the breeze, and written on it is, where liberty dwells, there is my country, by Benjamin Franklin. Underneath that is a cartoon that has a 5-tier birthday cake chock-filled with candles. The bottom layer, it says "Happy Birthday!" ! Standing next to the cake is a podium with the seal of the president on it and a caricature of President Trump at a microphone speaking. The caption, which comes in from off the frame, you don't see who's saying this, but it says 250 candles, ! Then underneath that, the bubble says, fortunately, there's a blowhard on hand. Next to that is a cartoon that shows Mount Rushmore with all the presidents' heads. On top of each president's head is a clown hat. One is pink with white polka dots, one is blue with white polka dots, and on top of it's a triangle clown hat with a little poof ball on the top. And the caption on that cartoon says, "Happy Birthday, America." That's by Michael Ramirez. And then the cartoon below that one is a long horizontal cartoon that shows the famous buildings in Washington. There's the Capitol building, the White House, the Supreme Court building. There's a bunch of fireworks going off and smoke, and the caption at the top of that cartoon says, "America's 250 fireworks," and then in the lower half of the cartoon there is an Uncle Sam character with both of his hands up holding his ears. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, July 5th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News every Sunday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been Jackie. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,